Almagosa, so we decided to go to Camp Number 2, which is located at Mallup Falls. Found Clark Eldridge and Reed Hubbard there, and most of the office staff. We were given a fine meal of boiled beef, bread and coffee, cooked in a native's house. Our next move was to Agate, in the truck where Art Okapinti and I made arrangements to stay with Mr. Bagate, the Marine officer. He provided food for us. We used our mattresses to sleep. Clark Eldridge, Charlie Craver, Art, Bagate, and I took turns watching for Japanese landing parties. My watch was around 2 to 3 a.m. Group of 10 to 15 contractors were lodged in a house up the street. The town was deserted except for us. Parked my truck near the house, ready to flee in case of a landing party. Still have 52-gallon drum of gas. Dick Arvidson. I remained in the Fina district during the day. The surrounding area is shelled by Japanese destroyers offshore. Relocated to a nearby ranch and slept at that location. Sleeping was a problem because it was done on the ground, outside, and the area was full of mosquitoes, which made sleeping virtually impossible. Wednesday, December 10th, 1941. Max Radowski. On the third day of a relentless attack from sea and air, the little brown supermen poured onto the beaches. Our 125 Marines had little chance against the thousands of the well-armed and well-supported Japanese troops. Charles F. Gregg. The Surrender of Guam. 1 a.m. From 1 a.m. to 4:45 a.m., I remained at the field post of the Marine Commandant, Major Spicer, in readiness to follow any orders relevant to destruction of Pan American equipment and supplies. Since the island's U.S. Naval Governor, Captain George J. McMillan, had not given the go-ahead signal, the Commandant refrained from taking such action. Dick Arvidson, 2:30 a.m. We considered moving further into the interior due to a more protected area, but the plan is not carried out due to darkness and unfamiliarity with the local terrain. Chuck Gregg, Charles F. Gregg, 3 a.m. By 3 a.m., it was known that the Japanese were landing at several places on the island. At 4 a.m., machine gun and rifle fire was heard in the direction of Petey, and the glow of burning buildings was seen. While I was lying down, Starr and a group went out to 1,000 steps to check on a reported landing party. He found a boat with construction markings, Midway Island, capacity 25 persons, but no people. Shortly after he returned, a glow appeared over Petey, and machine gun fire was heard. On return of Starr, Colonel McNulty issued orders for the Marine munitions dump to be blown up, and Lieutenant Marks left with a party to accomplish this mission. Plans were laid to prepare for landing parties in considerable numbers at Sume. Walter E. Durham. On December 8th and 9th, the Japanese bombed Guam. During those two times, I used my medical experience and my medical kit for several injuries. December 10th at 4:30 a.m., when I arrived at the lower part of Agana, Guam, I was machine gunned by the Japanese and forced to stop my car. They took me out of the car and searched me, and they thought I was lying about being a civilian because I had a medical kit in my car, so they knocked me over the head, stripped my clothes off, and smashed me in the face. But the worst part of it was two of them took me down onto the beach and made me run, and I could see myself laying there just as dead as a doornail. They then took me and tied my hands behind me, bumped me up the road, and finally, after a few blocks over towards Agana, they picked up 6 more Navy flyers who were attached to me by a rope. Charles F. Gregg, 4:45 a.m. The Commandant ordered me to take a message to Lieutenant Morgan in charge of the Marine Detachment at Mount Almagosa. also to take 2 other civilians then at the command post to Almagosa and remain in hiding until we receive further orders. Taking a message from Morgan, I started out for Almagosa. Sidney McMichael of the cable company and his assistant, George O'Connor, decided to go with me. We picked up several Chamorros and took them to Agate. Agate was evacuated and Chamorros were running wildly to the hills. At the crossroads to Agate, Agana, Sume, we passed a Navy driver from Agana with death written all over his face. We learned that Agana was surrounded by the enemy. On request, we told the driver how to reach the command post. Past contractors' men scattering in the hills who confirmed Agana had fallen. The commander's message was delivered at 5 a.m. to Lieutenant Morgan, who said parties of Japanese had landed at all beaches and Agana was badly shot up. He started groups back into the deep boondocks with cases of food. I hid the car and joined the Pan Air group who were hiding. Roy Henning. On the 3rd day, Max shook me out of sleeping in the shack where the cable operators had lived. He said, "Come on, Roy, it's getting light and we've got to get going." I said, "Max, count me out. I'm going to stay here. I don't care anymore." It was true. I had run out of stamina and had run out of fear. It's funny, but fear had disappeared at that point. I was petrified up to that stage. So Max took off, probably crossed the island several times, but each night he'd come back to the same place with the other guys going with him. Dick Arvidsson, 6 a.m. Heard rumors that the Japanese are landing on Guam. At this time, we observed many Japanese vessels offshore, including what appears to be troop transports. 8 a.m. Heard rumors that the military forces on the island have surrendered and the Japanese are rapidly occupying the island. Harold Brinkerhoff. I took the binoculars Cruz had. Dawn broke, and in the distance, standing off Agana, I could see a Japanese fleet of 2 light cruisers and 5 troop transports. Everywhere within my view were destroyers patrolling back and forth. The war has come to Guam. All hell will soon be breaking loose. Cruz and I returned to the dugout to tell the other boys. They had deserted us during our watch. We did not see them again. Cruz and I ate breakfast. We watched and waited impatiently. Orotai Point overlooks the entrance to Petey Harbor. There is a sandy beach below the dugout. We expected Japanese might make a landing here. All was serene, not a Japanese to be seen. At 7:30 we got thirsty as we had run out of water. We went down to the beach to get some coconuts. To get to the beach we had to go down a set of steps cut out of the solid coral cliff. On reaching the top of the steps, called 1,000 Steps, we found 4 Marines. Colonel McNulty had expected the Japanese might land there and use 1,000 Steps to reach Orotai Point and the road to Sume. If we had known these Marines were so close, we probably would have slept better last night. We got some coconuts and quenched our thirst. We had barely reached the top of Orotai when explosions commenced on Cabras Island. My signal to run the trucks off the cliff into the ocean. I went to the furthest truck, stepped on the starter, and raced up the road for the cliff. I had only gone half the distance when one of the 8 o'clock Japanese raider planes appeared and swooped down and machine gunned. I felt no truck was worth my life. I ran it off the side of the road and made a run for the dugout. Standing in the doorway, Cruz was firing at the plane. His .30-30 did no more damage than a pea shooter. The Japanese plane circled and dropped bombs in an attempt to destroy a Marine ammunition magazine a couple hundred yards down the road. His bombs overshot by several hundred feet. The plane wheeled and disappeared. I said to Cruz, "Let's go shoot holes through the motors of the truck, blow the tires, and call it good." We hurried over to the furthest truck and took turns blowing holes in the motor and tires. While we were busy, a pickup drove up and several Marines got out. They told us that the Japanese had landed at Dungas Beach, east of Agana, and at Marizo, the south end of the island. The Marines set charges of dynamite in the ammunition shack and detonated them. Then all hell broke loose. There was a terrific explosion, and thin shells began popping like a battle was being waged. There was a lull. Cruz and I thought the shells had all exploded. There were still 3 trucks on the other side which had not been taken care of. Taking no chances, we dashed across in front of the ammunition shack. Just as we were passing, shells began exploding again. I heard an anti-aircraft shell pass between Cruz and me. We reached the safe spot and sat down to wipe our brows. What a close call. When our heartbeats returned to normal, we completed our job on the 3 other trucks. We did not see how the trucks could be made use by the Japanese, as all the trucks had large holes through the motors and the tires were all flat. These were huge all-metal dump trucks. The commercial Pacific Naval Air Base contractors were using them to haul massive boulders for the breakwater being built to protect the harbor. The harbor was being dredged so that large ships would be able to anchor inside. Ocean-going ships with deep draught would have to anchor outside the breakwater and have their goods transported to the docks in shallow draught, ship-to-shore boats. Cruz and his relatives lived on the other side of the island. We decided to try and make it over there. We entered the dugout and gathered the canned food, put it in a gunny sack, and started for Sume. We had to make a detour around the ammunition dump as shells were still exploding. It was tough going, trees and vines to trip us, and coral, sharp as razors, sticking up like rough honeycombs. Finally, we made our way back to the road. When near Sume, we decided we had better detour around the town. It was highly possible that the Japanese were in possession of Spre, the port, and Sume as well. A half-mile south of Sume, on a Rote Point road, we found a Marine Corps truck hidden in a coconut grove. It was filled with canned food. A short distance further, we found some Marines concealed in the bushes. We were shooting the breeze with them when the order came from Colonel McNulty for them to go to the Marine barracks in Sume and surrender. We accompanied the Marines to the junction of the Agate-Sume Road. Before the Marines left the jungle, they took the bolts from their rifles and threw them in the deep bush. Their canteens, sidearms, and all other accoutrement went in the opposite direction. Cruz and I went into the jungle to retrieve a couple of canteens for our journey over the mountain to the other side of the island. We found a canteen for each of us. We had almost reached the highway when a speeding contractor's pickup with a Japanese flag draped over the hood turned the corner just ahead. The only cover was some tumbleweeds. I dropped behind one of these. The brakes of the pickup screamed. It came to an abrupt stop. I stood up as I was sure the Japanese would start shooting. Cruz and I walked to the pickup. There were 2 Japanese in it. The driver motioned for us to get in the back. Cruz had dropped his rifle in the weeds when the pickup had stopped. As we drove away, I took the binoculars from around my neck and tossed them into the bushes along with my canteen. We were driven into Sume where the Japs stopped in front of a store. The driver got out and went in. I asked Cruz who owned the store. Cruz said it was owned by a Japanese named Ben Cook. A Japanese bomb had hit and destroyed one corner of his store. Ben was without a doubt a Japanese spy. He probably had something to do with the signal fires we had seen the past few nights. I followed Ben into the store and said to him, "Are you going to turn us over to the Japanese?" He answered that he was. I looked closely and could see that he had no guns, so I said, "Goodbye, Ben," and walked out. Cruz was nowhere to be seen. I decided if I was to be captured, I wanted to be with some of my fellow Americans. Charles F. Gregg, 11:30 a.m. there was a loud honking of horns and a truck of the naval government driven by